All right, so we left off last week on the top of page 76, um, second full paragraph. And we've been moving kind of slow up to this point, I guess, if you're looking at the steps, Basically, I think the first step probably took us 3 months to get through the first three chapters and all the beginning stuff, and then probably a month for each step after that. And then we get to the top of 76. We just finished step 5, uh, which is interesting. Some of the highlights we found in that in step 5 was the first thing we learned on page 72. The bottom of the page, it says best reason first for doing this step. If we skip it, this vital step, this vital. Anybody remember the definition of vital? Let's throw that out. Necessary for life. Some people are paying attention. And I noticed that, like Lou did the opening remarks this morning, and I did sit back and listen to this, and Lou did some ad lib. He read some things and he started explaining what he read. That's kind of what I'm doing up here, explaining what we read. When I see people do that, that tells me that they get this when they're starting to explain. We see a few guys in here now that have started doing this. So that is a wonderful thing to see. But anyhow, if we skip it, we will not overcome drinking. That's a good reason to do it, huh? And I think it even reminded us again that that we were willing to go to any lengths that was agreed upon in the beginning. So we should be doing this. And then we get into doing the fifth step, admitting to God, to ourselves, and other human beings, the exact nature of our wrongs. Then on page 75, it doesn't get into a whole lot of what we do other than we're discussing our life story that we wrote down in our fourth step. And the parts of our life story we're most interested in is the character defects, the manifestations of self, which is the root problem for the alcoholic, how that has made our life unmanageable, second part of step 1, because it wasn't drinking that did it. It was that did it. So we're discussing that with another human being. And all it says, we pocket our pride and go to it. We're going to be, this is the focus, to illuminate every twist of character and every dark cranny of the past. That's what we do. And then it just goes on in the next sentence. This is a second full paragraph on 75. Then it tells us a little bit about the promises of step 5. We don't hear much about other promises other than the 9th step promises. But we saw here there was some promises. It says once we've taken the step withholding nothing, we're delighted and we can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. Those are some wonderful things, huh? Supposed to happen from step 5. But get this. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now, and I would underline this, we begin to have a spiritual experience. This is where the spiritual experience begins to, remember, that's the goal. Look at step 12, it's written up here. That's the goal, not to be sober, but to have a spiritual experience. It says you will begin to have this at that point. And prior to that sentence, it told us what that felt like. Fears falling from us, right? Looking the world in the eye, being at perfect peace and ease. That's how we feel. There's two things that happen in a spiritual experience. You can read the promises on step 9. It says, by that time, a little preview of coming attractions, by the time you're halfway through step 9, you will have had a spiritual experience if you thoroughly follow this path. If not, something went wrong. Must have missed something. And it tells you, most of what you read there is kind of how you feel and how life feels. It doesn't talk anything about the drink problem, right? At least not there. But when you flip the page, then it starts talking about once we've recovered and our sanity has been restored, having the spiritual experience, then it tells us what happens when the drink problem is removed. So two things happen. The mental insanity gets removed. So we're no longer having this obsession to drink, and life gets pretty damn good. Two separate things. So when they say we begin to have a spiritual experience, they explain what it felt like in the beginning of that paragraph. But now after that statement, we begin to have a spiritual experience. Now it says the feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. That's part of the experience, spiritual experience as well. The feeling of the drink problem having been removed. I'm not restless, irritable, and discontent. I'm at perfect peace. So I'm not thinking about the sense of ease and comfort I'm going to get from a drink. Drink problems removed. I feel good and I'm sober. Got both those things happening. And then it goes on to say we feel we're on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. I think it's a very important paragraph. It tells us a whole lot. This is where everything begins to happen. Then we got directions of what we do afterwards. Then we turn to page 76 and we get on to step 6, where it says, and I'm just going to cover this one more time because I know we went into it in real depth last week. Step 6, it's covered in one whole paragraph. It says if we can answer to our satisfaction, that is, what are we answering? That we didn't skimp on anything with the first 4 steps. That's the last part of step 5, is making sure that we didn't miss anything because we're building our foundation on this. And so if we can answer yes, then we look at step 6. We've emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things we admitted are objectionable? And we discussed why we might hold on to some of those things last week. I'm not going to get into it this week, but we need to make sure we're willing to let go of those things. Can he, capital H, being God as you understand him, now take them all, every one, all of the manifestations of self? However, it goes on to say, if we still cling to something that we won't let go of, if I cling to something I won't let go of, what do I do about that? It's not willing to have that change yet, right? Not willing to let that go. It says we ask God. We ask God to help us be willing. That there is the dependence upon God that we're looking for here. This whole deal, if you remember, if we go back to page XVI, there's 6 things these guys were doing in the very beginning. If you remember, number 5 was that it is necessary for a belief in God. And number 6 was that it's necessary for dependence upon God, right? We learned that in step 3, the deal was we're going to stick close to him and perform his work well, and he's going to provide everything we need, right? So that means we're going to have to depend on him to find out what he wants us to do. And when we already know our own frailties, when I take life in my own hands, more often than not, I screw everything up and make it worse than it was to begin with, right? We figured that out. So now when I get stuck, if I'm not willing to let it go, I ask God. Back to, he's either everything or nothing. I can get stuck in saying, I'm not willing to let that go. I don't care. And that's that. No. Are you willing to go to any lengths? You're not going to get over the drink problem if you're not willing to let go of everything. Let him provide what we need. Everything we need. That means I do not provide for me anymore. That's the deal. And if we're not willing, we ask. That's dependence. What does ask mean? Right? That's what that means. So that's step 6. Now, let's see how much in depth. Now we're going to have to pay very close attention because, like I said, normally it takes about a month to cover a step. Today we just covered step 6. We're going to do 7. We're going to do 8, and we're going to begin 9. So a lot of information here. Step 7. It says when ready. Well, how do we know when we're ready? When we're willing to let God take everything from step 6, then we're ready. And it says when we're ready, we say something like this. That means it doesn't have to be this, but it needs to be something like this. In other words, the ideas are expressed. The same thing they said in step 3. The words were optional, all right, as long as we're expressing this. So it says, and we do this at the end of every meeting. Why do we do this at the end of every meeting? Why do we do the 3rd step prayer at the beginning of every meeting? And why do we do the 7th step prayer at the end of every meeting? Don't they at most meetings do the serenity prayer and then close with the Lord's Prayer? By the way, a Christian prayer, and we're not involved or associated with any religion, right? Why? Because where's the AA program found? First portion of this book. Ain't in the book, ain't part of the program. That's why we do what's in the book. Serenity prayer is not in this book. Some people are, myself, when I first heard that, no, it's got to be in there. I mean, they say it everywhere. How can it not be in there? Not in there. Not in there. So anyhow, we say something like this. My Creator, I am now willing. Now I'm willing. That you should take all of me, the good and the bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Not my usefulness to me, my usefulness to you and my fellows. Keep that thought in mind because we're going to be coming back to that. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Whose will we trying to exercise? God's will, not mine. Amen. We've completed step 7. Any questions about that? It's a pretty simple deal, isn't it? Am I willing? If I am, I tell God I'm willing. And I ask him to remove these things. There it is. So that's step 7. Now we need more action. They started out saying action, and this chapter is called what? Into action. We have a program of what? A program of action. That's why we're seeing a lot of actions in this chapter. We're going to need more action, for without which we find that faith without works is dead. So let's look at steps 8 and 9. So step 8, what does that say? Made a list of all persons we'd harm and became willing to make amends to them all. Oh, we got to make a list. And let's see what this says. We have a list of all persons we've harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. So now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. So we already have the list. We don't make a new list. Unless you were led by somebody like I was at one time when I did my 4th step and my 5th step and we were done and we got done discussing it and we went outside. I was in a treatment center at 15 years old. We went outside and said, good, now we can let all this stuff go. And we burned our 4th step. So when I did that, I no longer had my list. Kind of hard to work without a list, isn't it? You know? Right. So it says here that we need to hang on to that list. Right? So we know the amends we're going to make because it's all in our 4th step. And it says the last, so that's it for 8. It says you already have your list. You're done. You're already done. I don't even know why they threw that in there because you're not doing nothing. It said we made a list and you already have it. Unless it's just to warn people like my mentor at that time who said, burn it, don't do it. You need this list. They could have made that a little more clear. But I think there's a second part to it that we might be more interested in. And it's the same thing we're interested in what we just read in step 6. Became willing to make amends to them all. So we're not even making amends yet. We're just saying, are you willing to make amends to everybody? Even those ones that you think, I'll never go to that SOB. Are we willing to make amends to them all? Well, we'll probably read it a little later, but I think if you just look back at step 6 and what we've learned so far about this dependence thing, if we're not willing to make amends, what do you think they're going to suggest that we do about that? Probably going to need to ask God to help us be willing, right? Help me be willing. And I think from my experience, when you look at step 5, that's a real tough one for people to sit down and say, I'm going to be willing to do this, discuss all these defects and every dark cranny of the past that I pushed down. I'm going to discuss that with somebody. That doesn't sound like something I'm going to want to do. But I think that this step 9, just the thought of it, going out and making amends to these people can be even much more, we could be much more resistant to doing that. So yeah, we'll ask God to make us willing, but what's even going to make us ask God for us to be willing? This goes all the way back to the beginning. Alcohol is a great persuader. It beats us into a state of reasonableness. You're going to go back to that if you're an alcoholic and you don't do this. Are you willing? And doesn't that go back to one question that we asked right in the very beginning with a newcomer? Are you willing to go to any lengths? Because there are lengths we're going to be going to, and some of them are pretty great lengths. So that's what they're talking about. So the end of this paragraph, actually step 8 was only half of that paragraph. So it says, we attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. I'd underline that because that's what this step 9 is about. That's what those defects are about. We're attempting to sweep away the debris that did not accumulate out of our drinking. A lot of people think that. And I've heard that a lot. And I probably repeated that a lot before I got educated. But they're saying the stuff that is accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. That's the problem. Selfishness, self-centeredness. All of these problems that I've seen that have accumulated, all these people that I have hurt, have been based on those character defects that I found in step 4 and 5, which are just manifestations of self, which is the root problem of the alcoholic. So that's what we're looking at straightening out. Oh, there it is. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. There it is again, depending on God. And then it goes into stamping this again. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning, and this is all in italics, we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Here's your question. You're working with a new guy? I'll never go. I'm not going to him. I'm not. Okay, well, take him to this paragraph right here. Solidify this right here. If you're not willing to do it, chances are you're not going to get over drinking. It was agreed in the beginning you're willing to go to any lengths. And if you're not willing to do it, you still have an option. If you can't get over your own stubbornness and resistance from doing it, you have another option. And it says, ask God for the strength. It's okay that you don't have it. It's okay. He's either going to give it to you or he's not. He's either everything or he's nothing. Try and see. So we have options here to get this to happen. So there it is. Probably there are still some misgivings as we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt. We may feel diffident about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Do you think? Let us be reassured. To some people, we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. That indicates there might be more than one approach that's necessary. Why? Because we might prejudice them. We're not going to go in with this blah, blah, blah about God and why I'm doing this. We're going to straighten out the past. Here it says, why are we doing this through step 9? Because it says at the moment we're trying to put our lives in order. If you remember, Dr. Silkworth said that these men are trying to recreate their lives. Same thing. We're trying to recreate our lives. Right now it says, as we're going through step 9, our focus right now is to put our lives in order. But that's just at the moment, because this is not an end in itself, it says. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. That is going to be our new purpose in life. So if you think about all the plans and all the dreams and everything you want for yourself, well, guess what? This is the new goal. And this is the only goal, is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. And I can't do that when I got all this crap, these resentments and all this crap from the past and the guilt and the shame and the remorse. I can't do that. I need to get a clean slate. And that's why we're doing it. That is going to be our new purpose as we go forward. It is seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts from our injustice to him and announce that we've gone religious. In the prize ring, this would be called leading with the chin. So what do I mean by that? Exactly what Lou just showed. It's like, so I'm here to make amends. I mean, it's okay with what you did, but see, I'm on a much higher spiritual ground now, and you wouldn't understand. So let me just not explain it to you. I mean, I'm far superior. You see where that's going to all go wrong, right? That's not where we're at. It says, why lay ourselves open to be branded fanatics or religious bores? We may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message. You know, they bring that up a lot. I remember when we get, I think, into chapter 7, working with others, they talk about when you first meet somebody and you start working with them, if they're not interested, it basically says, and I have to paraphrase that, we let them go. We don't chase them down. Why? It tells us why we don't chase them down. It says, because you might spoil a future opportunity. If he's not beat up enough yet, let him go. Wish him the best and let him know you're here if he needs you later. If he goes out and doesn't find a better way, if he's a true alcoholic, he will drink again. He may or may not make it back, but if he does, you haven't chased him down and got him to, I don't want nothing to do with that. They're saying the same thing here. We do not want to kill a future opportunity. Even if you don't like this person. Think about that. It's one thing to already say, I got to go make amends to this SOB that I don't like very much. And now it says I might have to carry a beneficial message to him later. So I don't want to spoil anything. I need to come on a humble ground. Because after all, our new purpose is to be of maximum service to God and to all people, even the ones we don't like. But our man is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to set right the wrong. He's going to be more interested, and I'd underline this, more interested in a demonstration of goodwill than in our talk of spiritual discoveries. We don't use this as an excuse for shying away from the subject of God. When it will serve any good purpose, we are willing to announce our convictions with tact and common sense. The question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. So now we're looking at our list, and I like looking at it this way at this point. We got a list of all these people we need to make amends to. You probably could categorize them in the ones that are going to be the easiest to the ones that were going to be the hardest, right? So now we're getting right to the person we hated. How do we get to that? And notice, step 9, you're talking about making amends. Notice it doesn't say that we're making apologies, right? We're talking about amends is the exact same thing. It's a synonym for restitution. And they use the word restitution in here. We're making restitution. You know what restitution is? We're looking at equal restitution. I stole 500 from you. It's one thing for me to say I'm sorry, and the guy will say, well, thank you. I appreciate the apology. Where's my $500? Equal restitution would be to give him back that $500, right? And finding a way. But you just think about all the numerous things that we could have to make amends for. There's just so many things. And they're going to cover pretty much every bit of it in here. We're going to get probably the most clear-cut directions that I've seen in this book come out of this step. It starts with the person we hated the most. It may be that he's done more harm to us than we've done to him. And though we may have acquired a better attitude towards him, we're still not too keen about admitting our faults. Well, of course not. He did a lot worse to me than I did to him. I mean, I at that point, I think most of us will say, well, look, I'm willing to just call it even though it's not even. But we're not even discussing him. We're discussing me. Nevertheless, with the person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. And I would underline this, that it is harder to go to an enemy than to a friend. But we find it much more beneficial to us to go to the enemy than to the friend. That is much more beneficial to us. Now, as we go through this, they talk about this list and they talk about making amends, and we're going to talk about the different types of amends. But you know what they don't tell us? They don't tell us anything about the order of the amends. So it really doesn't matter. But I tell you, I've learned something a while ago, and this is an opinion. It's not my opinion, but it's an opinion that I heard from somebody else. I think it originally came from Joe and Charlie, but it's a great thing, because if you start with the person you hate, it might stop you from doing the whole thing. So one thing that was suggested is, since it doesn't tell us what order, so it doesn't matter, start with the easiest ones. And what they say is, when are we supposed to be recovered? Halfway through step 9, halfway through our amends. Start with the easiest ones and see the results you start to get from that. And it says when you start seeing the results you get from that, you're going to be more willing to do the next ones. And by the time you get to the person you hated, you're going to be past halfway through. You will have been recovered. You will be seeing these promises in your life. You're going to be more willing than ever to go to any lengths and get to these last ones. So if there's some people that are just, I'll never do it, just set it to the side and start with the easier ones first. Just something that was brought to my attention. But anyhow, we find it much more beneficial to go to the enemy than the friend. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit. So there's the attitude before we even go to him. I'm here to be helpful in any way I can to you, and I'm here to forgive you. Somebody brought that up last week. Isn't this about forgiving? Right here, it's already starting that way. If he's done me more harm than him, while yes, I need to make amends for my part, I need to go to him in a forgiving spirit, willing to let go of what that person did to me. Have to. We already learned about resentments. Number one killer. It's going to kill us. It chains us. It chains us to that resentment, which blocks us from God, which will block us from ever being able to recover. So we don't want that. Underline this, another clear-cut direction. Under no condition do we criticize such a person, and under no conditions do we argue with the person. Okay? Simply, we tell him that we will never get over our drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. We are there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so. Never trying to tell him what he should do. But underline this. Just look at all the clear-cut directions. His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. But we don't go in saying, well, I did do this to you, but so it doesn't matter. You did 10 times worse than me. Forget that. We don't even discuss it. I'm coming to him with a forgiving spirit, so I'm done with that. I'm just here to straighten out my past. His faults, we stick to our own. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the results. In 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. The unexpected, I like that too. because we have grand delusions of, oh, that'll never work. I'm going to go to him to make amends and he's going to throw me right out. He's going to want to knock my lights out. This is not going to work out. Well, their experience shows in 9 out of 10 cases, something unexpected happens if we're calm, frank, and open. Sometimes the man we're calling upon admits his own faults. So feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Happened to me with my father, which I've talked to you guys about before. Feuds of years that were going on in my own head, decades in my own head, melted away in a conversation that took less than an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we are doing and wish us well. That would be an unexpected thing that they say happens 9 out of 10. Occasionally, they'll offer assistance. But underline this now. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We've, 1, made our demonstration, and 2, we have done our part. Remember, this is not conditional upon them accepting restitution. This is conditional of us doing our utmost to make right the wrong, period. If they don't want it, we've done our part. That's it. We didn't fail. It's water over the dam. Most alcoholics owe money. We do not dodge our creditors, telling them what we are trying to do. We make no bones about our drinking. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. Nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory it may cause financial harm. We are not afraid. See that word afraid? You learn a whole lot about fear. We do not dodge our creditors. Approached in this way, the most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. Here's the directions of how we deal with creditors. I would underline this. The first thing we do is we arrange the best deal we can. And 2, we let these people know we're sorry. So there's an apology in there. But the first thing we're going to be doing is arranging the best deal we can. So let's go back to, I stole $500 from you. Well, I don't have the money right now to pay you $500. Okay, best deal I can I give you $20 a week? Can I give you $5? There's something. Got to be able to do something. And this leads to, known somebody who's owed 6 figures to somebody and they don't know about it. So it just became, you know what, I'll never be able to do that. So I'll never be able to do that. So there's no point even going to it. You arrange the best deal possible. Are you telling me you can't come up with $2 a week? If you go to 2 meetings a week, you usually drop $1 in the basket. You can't come up with anything is the best deal. But doing nothing is not optional. And you might not be able to do it in your lifetime, but you're trying. You're doing everything you can to make it right. That is the deal. Go to any lengths and find a way that you can do the best you can to make it right. Our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go. For we are liable to drink if we are afraid to face them. That sounds like a promise, doesn't it? Mm. We're liable to drink if we carry this fear, if we avoid the phone calls from the creditors, throw away the letters. That's going to make us liable to drink. We have to straighten this out. Perhaps we committed a criminal offense, which might land us in jail if it were known to the authorities. Uh-oh. How do you deal with that? We may be short on our accounts and unable to make good. We've already admitted this in confidence to another person, but we're sure we would be imprisoned or lose our job if it were known. Maybe it's only a petty offense such as padding the expense account, and many of us have done that sort of thing. Maybe we are divorced and have remarried, but haven't kept up the alimony to number 1. She's indignant about it and has a warrant out for our arrest. That's a common form of trouble too. Getting in some real clear-cut deals, aren't they? What do we do about these? Although these reparations take innumerable forms, but underline this, there are some general principles which we find guiding. 1, reminding ourselves that, once again, we have decided to go to any lengths to find the spiritual experience. 2, we ask, well, let's pray again, that we be given the strength and the direction to do the right thing. So that means I don't make up my mind how I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to ask God what I need to do to take care of this. 3, no matter what the personal consequences may be. Boy, that sounds like willing to go to any lengths, isn't it? Regardless of what the consequences may be. But we may lose our position or reputation, or face jail, but we are willing. Are you willing to go to any lengths? We have to be. We must not shrink at anything. Fear. Usually, however, other people are involved. Therefore, we are not to be the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic pit. Okay. Here's an example. A man we know had remarried. Because of resentment and drinking, he had not paid alimony to his first wife. She was furious. She went to court and got an order for his arrest. He had commenced our way of living. Doesn't say he got sober. He commenced our way of living. And then he secured a position and was getting his head above water. It would have been impressive heroics if he'd walked up to the judge and said, "Here I am. Got a warrant. Throw me in jail." We thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary, but if he were in jail, he could provide nothing for either family. Think about that sentence. We thought he ought to be willing. Sounds like he must have counseled with somebody, didn't he? Because this was even more than one person. We thought. So we counsel with God. We've already learned before, we counsel with others. But who did we learn has the ultimate say? God. A lot of counseling needs to go into this. We suggested that he write his first wife, admitting his faults and asking forgiveness. He did, not just said he was sorry, and also sent a small amount of money. He told her what he would try to do in the future, arrange the best deal possible financially. He said he was perfectly willing to go to jail if she insisted. Of course, she did not, and the whole situation has long been adjusted. Isn't that something? Simple guiding principles. Underline, highlight this. Before taking drastic action, before you set out to do your amends, which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. If we have obtained permission, also have consulted with others, also have consulted with God to help, and the drastic step is then indicated, we must not shrink. So what does that mean? Before taking drastic action, we must not implicate other people without securing their consent. That could take on innumerable forms as well. It could be, well, we'll see an example, but it could be right off the bat, if you have an affair, the first, okay, and I'm sorry, and it won't happen again. And, and a lot of times it'll tell us when they talk about securing the best deal, the best guiding principle I've ever found with this, if the clear-cut directions are not in here, it's just like this. If I need to make equal restitution, that means that what I did to you, you're going to get full restitution, right? If I'm not sure what that is or how to do that, the best way to find out what it is? Ask them. How can I make this right? What will make it right to you? That wipes out 90% of it. But here it is. So I'm admitting to my spouse that I had an affair. What's one of the first things she's going to say? Who? Who is it? Right? Because now jealousy and anger is all building up, right? Who? I have no right to implicate others without their consent. In that case, there's probably not going to be any good reason to get their consent to say who. But in certain instances, there might be an instance where if they want to know who, but we don't give the who without securing their consent. So how do we secure their consent? We got to go ask them if it's okay. That's what they're saying. All right. So this brings to mind a story about one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival, and he gave him no receipt for it. Took a lot of money from this guy. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as a basis for discrediting the man. What money? He never got any money. He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. How do you write that? He felt that he had done a wrong he could not possibly make right. If he opened that old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner. So he's got a business partner, right? And I'm going to admit that I took money from this guy. That's going to destroy my firm, and that unjustly gives ramifications to my partner. Also disgraces his family, and also takes away his means of livelihood for his family. You're implicating a lot of other people in this, right? You could cause more harm to more people by doing this. What right had he to involve those dependent on him? How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival? What did he do? He consulted with his wife. He consulted with his partner. And then he came to the conclusion that it was better to take those risks than to stand before his creator guilty of such ruinous slander. He saw that, and I would underline this, he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again. He was convinced of that. Had to put it in God's hands. And all would be lost anyhow. He attended church for the first time in many years, and after the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. His action met widespread approval, and today he's one of the most trusted citizens of his town. This all happened years ago. The chances are we have domestic problems, and that's going to be for another day, but that's long. So let's stop right there for the day.